Welcome, everyone. We actually have a special show tonight. This is our after show. Yeah, of course, we do the Healing is War podcast on Wednesdays, but I think this might turn into a new segment here where we catch up with the guest and find out what happened after their appearance. Today, we actually have Heather and Ferri. You might remember her from several weeks ago. We talked about throwing out your healing toolkit, and a lot of things have transpired since her appearance on the show. And that's why we are reconnecting to speak with her about all of that. Welcome, Heather. I just want to first of all say congratulations because on November the 5th, right, your book was released. See, there it is. And the title of the book, you can see there, everyone, is Transcending Victim to Goddess, Disrupting the Family Matrix and Healing Generational Trauma from My Bloodline. I read the description on Amazon. It's a manual. It's not just a book. It's something you can work through. I do, based on all of this family matrix, I know you had another spiritual encounter with your father, much like we talked about it on the main show. What was it your father spoke to you about this title? Because I know you released a book back in 2018 called Victim to Victory, and he kind of said, "No, you need to shift this title. It needs to be something else." What did he tell you?
That's a great question. So obviously it went from victim to victory to goddess, the victory goddess. So basically what I want to share with the audience, if you don't mind, I want to play like a little question game with you. And it's something that this is how my angels and my spiritual counsel works with me. I want to ask you a question about the word goddess, if you're up for it. You up for it?
I'm game. I like
Okay.
games.
Okay, so here's the game. So when you hear the word goddess, when was the first time you've ever heard the word goddess? Do you remember?
Mm, I had to be in my 20s, and it was most likely me exploring my own history, and I took Black studies in college. So hearing about gods and goddesses and those types of things when it comes to Egypt, all of that, that's the first time I recall goddess.
Okay, so for me, the first time, because this is something the audience can do, because I think we hear these words and we kind of fluff them off, but there's a real importance, almost a whole training in just the word goddess that I went through with not just my father, but my spiritual counsel and through all of the healings for the women and my maternal bloodline and obviously my past lives. So the first time I heard the word goddess was after my father died in 2022. So I had never heard the word goddess before that. So that can start to shape somebody's psychology, right? I heard the word God all the time, and I always interpreted God as masculine. So if we're in an environment where you're hearing God, God, God all the time, you're thinking that, you're channeling or working with men. And so this starts to break down, whatever your environment is. So, and you may not have heard the word God before. So we're breaking this down. So that's the first time I heard the word goddess, and it was really a foreign language to me. I had no idea of even what to think of a goddess. And so I had to start as I was shaking trauma out of my ankles and my throat and these chains and seeing these visuals of torture. And I had to think about what was the psychology? Why would people torture mothers or little girls? I thought, well, why don't do we hear about goddess in the religious? I don't know. I'm not religious, and there's a lot behind that in book 2 and book 3. I introduced these concepts, these questions in book 1 by introducing that there is a Catholic nun that's murdered. It's a pretty big case. And I introduced this. This is exposed to me 15 years ago. That opens up the door of why do light beings, why are they tortured? Why are they taken off Mother Earth so quickly? And why is there sort of murders, tortures sort of slipped under the table? You know, these concepts start coming as I'm healing in the goddess. So, yeah, goddess was a foreign language to me. And then as I'm on my healing journey, which you're going to read more, a lot more in book 2, I go through about 8 days where I'm going through these downloads, and you're an artist also, where I'm writing songs. And I wrote a song for my maternal grandmother. And this is like within, minutes, and the word goddess is in that song. Because there was a moment in my life years ago that I was extremely suicidal and traumatized over a situation that happened in the family. And I heard a voice go to grandma's house. And when I opened the door, she held my pain in her arms. The only person that could do that in my life, in my family system. And we had a prophecy, a very spiritual moment in the kitchen for a couple hours. And you don't forget those memories. At least I don't ever want to forget those memories. Those memories I want to hold on to like a warm blanket, right? And as I shake out all the trauma from my childhood abuse, I want to remember it so I don't allow or I understand what evil, how it speaks and how it walks and how it talks. But I don't need to keep revisiting what it made me feel or keep it stored in my tissues, muscles, and bones. So as I wrote this song and I started to sing it to my grandmother on the other side, to myself, I started to understand that, especially in book 2 and book 3, because one thing I mentioned is when my dad died, I was writing book 2 as if it was going to come out. My dad's like, hold on. Before we show everybody just how psychic and how much of a medium you are with the Divine Mother, let's give them book 1 again, but in a different version. Let's give more of the healed child's perspective. Let's give them tools now. Let's get people to know their own stories instead of being fascinated with everybody else's story. Let's get them to start. So there's 133 questions in this manual.
Oh,
And if you've
wow.
got a coach or if you've got a healer, you can, maybe there's 2 questions that stir the pot for you and you can sit with them and explore those and get it out of your body. There's 3 medical meditations that are the foundation, and one of them deals with the God and Goddess word. We're introducing this to prepare you for book 2. So you're not like, book 2, we're breaking down systems now. We're breaking down all these men that did not see me as a goddess. Because I ask everybody out there that's listening today, especially the men, if you've never heard the word goddess, I'm assuming there might not be any training in seeing your daughters or your sisters or your women at the workplace or your partner as a goddess. And then you have to start to define, how do you treat a goddess? And that was the training that my father wanted me to have as I was healing generational stuff, past life stuff. Because he was like, oh, we don't want you to marry a man. We want you to marry a godly man that understands not only the definition of a goddess, but acts, opens the door like it's nothing because you're a goddess. Behaves in a way that sees you as a goddess. It's a feeling, it's an ingrained training, and maybe a training that we need to have specifically with our men, but also with our women. Because I could tell you in this city, I've never heard the word goddess. I've worked with tons of women in trauma. They've never heard the word goddess, and they have. It's been like a movie type thing or a slogan. It's not a belief system. It's not a definition that allows us to be looked at as spiritually beautiful, not just physically beautiful. And so that's where the transcending victim, which deals with a lot of layers, to goddess, my dad wanting that to be the through line. But so on the back cover, I talk a lot about my dad. This is a download. Do you mind if I read it?
Read it. Yeah, read it for us.
Yeah, this is a download that so I was waiting, people had heard on social media about these books, have been waiting because I wanted my soul tribe to come in. I've been on this path for a very long time, trying to find my soul tribe. I knew that I didn't fit in here, I didn't fit in here, but I knew there had to be a soul tribe. I can't just be here on my path alone the rest of my life. And I wanted to have them a part of the testimonies. I was waiting and waiting. And then finally, I don't know if it was Jimmy Slide or Mr. Rod. One of them was like, oh no, we're not going to do it the way everybody does it. Everybody has their testimonies, and some people pay lots of money to have a famous person write a testimony on your back cover. And
Hmm.
they're like, we're not doing that. We're going to have your dad, who's on the other side, write a testimony. And so I was like, oh, and then I got the download. And then I was like, oh, I get this is a tool. So when you see the front cover, you think women, healing your inner child goddess. But when you see the back cover, you think dad, you think man, you think interaction between God and goddess, or man and woman, or daughter. So here's a little bit of back cover that I think you could see it on Amazon if you order the book. Most authors ask somebody on earth to write a testimony for their book. And like I said, they could pay big money for that. But as a new earth healer, I no longer follow the programs of the past. I chose my father, Armando Gino Ferri, to walk beside me in this life. He played a role of a wounded and confused dad, a man whose soul was violated as a child, which I know what that violation is now, which is very important. This shaped my dad's dyslexia, inability to defend, and ancestral pain. What many don't know is that his soul once walked this earth as John Horse, a powerful warrior whose death during the Seminole Wars still carries unanswered questions, which I know how he died, but I'd like to ask those who do know how he died, and I'd like to interview you to question to see if you do really know how he died. That soul database lives in bones, and I healed it. My dad taught my family's system to sweep my pain and abuse into the forgive and forget basket. Yet we can never forget the trauma stored in our blood, bones, and soul database. In February 2022, my father passed, and I began to hear his angelic voice. He asked me to take my first book, Victim to Victory, off the shelf and rewrite it. And he chose the 8 chapters, and I wrote them from the lens of a healed child. The manual bridges Eastern and spiritual psychology to the New Earth self-care system, giving therapists, coaches, and organizations a tool with my keynote talks. Because my father was a blue-collar worker, he wanted the everyday person to benefit as well. I honor the men who serve this country by showing up daily, working with their hands and hearts. My father wanted this manual to be accessible, to remind us that you don't need fancy titles or degrees to matter. You need truth. You need tools. You need love. And you need someone to say, you deserve to heal too. My dad wanted my inner child to heal because his own never did. If he had healed, he might have protected our bond instead of letting others diminish it. He would have supported me and loved me by showing up. But now, from the angelic realm, he's doing that, guiding me to break the cycle, to tell the truth, and to heal what he could not.
Wow. Okay. You stated something just right there in what your father spoke as this testimonial. You said this manual is for the everyday person. And then there was a mention of hands and heart. It's there's synchronicity in that because that's my vision. Heal the entire world with hearts and hands.
Mm.
Where do you see this particular book, this reframed version of book one? Where is it going? Like, is it in certain organizations? Is it at the workplace? Where do you foresee this manual being used?
Great question. I think it would be a benefit to have it in organizations and nonprofits that definitely deal with mental health and victims, that deal with domestic violence. And really, the manual is used to train staff because, and to utilize it with staff so that when staff are interacting, even if they're doing paperwork for a domestic violence case, they are knowing more of the energy and how to heal it, or how to heal it within themselves. Because what I've noticed, having been exposed to many field social workers, senior homes, uh, a lot of caregivers, even if they're doing the paperwork, are sponges, and they're not able to release, or they're not being trained a lot to know the questions or how to help calm down somebody. So it's a training for staff. It's a training for them to then, or if you're a coach, to say, okay, you've had childhood trauma, you were almost murdered. Let's have you read this book and answer all the questions, 133, in a notebook. Use a pen,
Mhm.
please. Don't type it. And let's listen to it. Let's listen to this. Gives therapists, this gives coaches and healers questions that they may not have ever thought about. Because I would say that's one of my assets throughout the years, is I've had a lot of really smart people as clients who have done a lot of talk therapy, and say been like stopped in their tracks with a soulful question, like, oh, and not even knowing, well, that question is going to lead into something that's going to unravel within either your relationship with your child, your relationship with your parent, your relationship with your partner, your relationship, in general. So that is where I see it first. But being connected to the Divine Mother, who knows where she sees the tool being
Mm.
used. You know what I mean? I am the guide and the vessel and the teacher, but who knows where she sees this going? It's a personal development tool, because the next book deals with work development systems, changing business systems, talking about what I think a lot of people, depending on what religion or spirituality or politics aside, I know in America, we're all really concerned that all our money is going into a medical system that has failed. And I really start breaking down practical real life experiences that I've experienced, along with other things in business, to then talk to business and leaders. But business and leaders also come from childhood trauma.
Yeah.
So maybe they need to revisit some things, to rewire, to be able to listen to the next book and see it from a different perspective, from a goddess, divine feminine healer in society, as opposed to, I just see Heather Ann Ferri as a woman. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
there's a preparation involved in this. So I would love to see a group of CEOs, go through this book. Um, And that's a little bit of a different setting, as you know, because CEOs have a huge responsibility. So we don't want to expose them to a lot of people. That's like a smaller type of retreat or workshop, where we're really specializing with them because they have a lot of responsibility and stress.
Yeah.
And their answers can't be known to their employees. But if they go through this book, they may go, you know what, this one medical meditation, let's do a meditation series for my employees so we can decrease the sicknesses, so we can decrease the mental health. It's that aspect.
Yeah, because what you're saying, and there's been a lot of talk about this in the business world, in just how things are shifting with corporations, with everything that's happening. They're going more to this balance of the feminine and masculine. There's no more of this hard work. We got to produce the products. Like just the other week, Amazon laid off all these people. All of these corporations are doing this. And I can see when the CEOs, when the leaders of these companies get together and do this work as the thought leaders, what can actually transition with their employees? What can transition with their company, with their vision? Because here's what because you're talking about a new earth healer. That's
Mm-hmm.
what's happening now. All of the old
Mm-hmm.
systems, in my opinion, they're dead. Like
Right,
I'm operating in a new paradigm. I'm not operating, oh, I got to pay my, you talk healthcare. I got to pay my health
right,
insurance and I got to depend on that, or I'm going to get
right,
my social security.
right.
Really?
Well, the thing
It's
is that's what prepares for book two because I have a lot of issues with our healthcare insurance, and
Mhm.
I want to break down the practicality of the systems, which I think a lot of people will agree with, that is hurting us to say, if we're putting money into this system that has failed, why can't we have a holistic care system? Why can't my money go into all the things that I had to pay out of pocket for? Period. No, like I want to balance. Like if people want pills, you buy this healthcare system. You can have
Mm,
all the pills and surgeries you want. That's your choice. But why am I forced to pay that? I don't want
true.
that. I want acupuncture, oils, massage, these types of things, spiritual healings. And, or I just want, if I'm hit by a car, major insurance, like which you had 20 years ago. You didn't have to pay for all this stuff. But so now we're all looped into one channel that has failed, and we know it's failed. The stats don't lie. And it's a wasted circulation of money. And also, all these magical pills we keep investing in. The new cure for this, well, book two starts to break down. And obviously, I break down this in my social media. If we don't address poison water and our poison soil and all the lawsuits happening in this country, come on. Like, come on. I mean,
Mhm.
it's right in our face why we have all these diseases. And then the other thing is it's not just training these CEOs. For a new earth, there are new types of businesses. And I'm not going to go into that today. They're going to have to be in front of me because that's my blueprint. That's my
Mhm.
intelligence that's worth something. But if we want to see a future with our children happier and healthier and everybody prospering without wars, there needs to be a different type of business structure involved. And I bring those examples in book two with a lot of turmoil, a lot of sort of exposing darknesses, but we have to expose all the darknesses right now. You have to expose your childhood traumas. You have to expose all the darknesses so that we don't keep repeating all of this stuff over and over again. So, anyway, I went on a tangent, but yeah.
No, that's what was needed to be said because in the title, Heather, it says disrupting the family matrix and healing generational trauma from my bloodline. What I read from this based on our conversation thus far is this family matrix, this generational trauma is just not family. It's systems in this country, it's systems across the world. It's the system that where goddess was not even mentioned or embodied. It wasn't mentioned at the least. No wonder it's not embodied. It's breaking all of this stuff down. Disruption. Okay, I got to ask you, why that word? Because it's such a strong, powerful word, disruption.
For me personally, because everyone was against me. So there is a disruption, and when I think about, 15 years ago, when I first started coming out about my childhood abuse, I was shamed, bullied, basically, from the people I thought would ask questions. And that's obviously, we know, because of their own scenarios of traumas and programs, however way they download them. But disrupting a system of false masks, of deep, dark lies, of having to not be a people pleaser, of disrupting a system where maybe people have dyslexia and they're judging the victim when maybe they should be actually looking at the predator. We have that going on every day right now in America. We have a
Mm.
dyslexic, we have a predatorial system of businesses too, but we also have a lot of dyslexia, emotional dyslexia, where we think we believe something, or we think somebody is good, or we think this is, and then we learn later it's not. And so the reason why each book has manuals and questions and meditations is we're introducing the idea that it took a lot. I had to keep going in every time I was faced with disruption, every time I was faced with, you're the problem. And I'm thinking, I'm not the problem. I'm a good person. How am I the problem? So that's the disruption. And as I keep shedding and shaking and crying, I realize that that is transcending all of the traumas and serious abuses into what people can't take from me right now. And I'll give you, I don't know if this is a good example or not, but it's a powerful moment today to be on this podcast with you. Because not only is it the first podcast where I'm talking about my book, my second book, but through my videos, I talk about, dreams, cars, everything has symbolism when people experience things. And last night through today was like sort of a lot of shaking in my ankles still of releasing a past life that I'm aware of now for myself that is coming into a full, I would say, healing for me. It's been a long journey. I've complicated ancestral lineage, but I'm going through another death, rebirth, disruption, disrupts the security and safety. Nobody wants to feel the pain or go through what we would call a spiritual death to then have a rebirth. We hear about these words religiously, but nobody really explains them. Nobody says you're going to have a fever and shake for hours and then at some point there'll be an awakening or a vision and it may come a couple days later. No, we take pills. I'm just speaking in general,
Wow.
like that's where
Yeah.
we've been. So today, when I had to go, I go to a certain location to do a couple hours of my own personal healing work on myself. I'm in the driver's seat driving. So I'm going somewhere. And as I'm at a stop sign, I turn to the parking lot and I see my biological mother in the car,
Really?
in the parking lot. Mhm.
Oh.
And she's sitting there, and I'm not going to say where she's located, but it's very symbolic of book two. And I'm sort of deciphering, is that her? By her mannerism, she looks at me, she looks away. And there was a lot of shame in her auric field. And I looked at this stranger, because unfortunately she is a stranger to me now, because there's been so much deaths of healing from this woman that not only tortured me as a child, but psychologically kind of took over the family system, threw me out, and said, you're the one that's got the problem. That's a typical narcissist point of view, psychopath. And I looked at her back, seeing the shame and the shame. And I was just like, huh. And I went on to go do my healing work. And then I sat with the Divine Mother later and I asked the question. This is what happens when you're working with somebody like me or you. And I asked the Divine Mother, was that my mother? And I got the answer no. And then I asked the question differently. I asked, was that woman? And I stated her name, her full name. And she said, yes.
Now, what did
And
you
so it's,
take that to mean?
um, well, it's interesting because the last time I saw my brother in the family unit, I was going through what would be then my second dark night of soul. I didn't know at the time. I was shaking and crying after her kicking me out of the house for helping her, and just this interaction I had with my mom. And my brother said, she's not your mom, the Divine Mother is. Now my brother's not a deep person. He's people pleaser. I have a lot of issues with him. There's a lot of stuff that just I had to move on, because there was just patterns and I was tired of the patterns. But it was a profound statement because he did witness some things during my dad's death. I don't know if it woke him up or not. That's for his own. But I thought about that today because, in essence, my being has a divine mother. I've always been connected to a divine mother. And recently I've been talking about Mother Mary, which I was deeply connected to Mother Mary, but that's not her original name from my perspective. So these things come to the fourth, who is, your mother. Now I have respect for this woman. She brought me into this earth in that
Hmm.
sense, but I don't have respect for all of the behavioral patterns and torture and all the lies and all the systematic things. And it would not serve her for me to be in her life, right? Because that would be enabling something that's extremely dysfunctional that needs to be disrupted. It needs to be disrupted, for her, for soul's evolution. So we need to disrupt, the way money's being used in America. We need to disrupt the reason why we don't have a different healthcare or health insurance system. We need to disrupt, these things. So yeah, I mean, that's just a sort of an example of, and then today's 23, if you add up numerology, which is the date of my birthday, the birth of this, moving into, I'm really excited about book two, to be honest with you, into book two. And so it wasn't a coincidence of seeing that energy today. It was just a declaration of a rebirth.
Hmm. And I'll tell you something else, because you just talked about the 23. In cardology, guess what today's card is? It's the Queen of Hearts, which is motherly love. So how about them apples? Like you can't make this up. That's what I love about the numerology, all of these things. You talk about the toolkit. These are our
Mhm.
tools to help us do the disruption. Because in
Mhm.
order to bring in the new paradigms, what is going to be introduced? In what way? What practices? Like you said, all of those are coming out in book two. But it's divine that today is the day this is happening. And I know you know this because it's being in alignment and just saying, oh, we're going to do it. Because even me and you decided on this day. I didn't, maybe energetically I knew, but
I didn't really, yeah.
yeah, me either. But it's so there's a perfection in it because when we have these types of conversations, the words actually serve as alchemy too to this disruption. We're talking about the disruption because sometimes these things are not voiced. All of the questions you ask in this book, people, CEOs, individuals, anybody else who's been through trauma has buried it. They dealt with it as a child and they had to bury it. What do you say to all of this, like the unspoken things that a child had to deal with, and how this book is going to allow them to, I'm just going to use the title of the book, transcend? The book is going to allow them to transcend from that childhood self.
Yeah, I feel like, you know, especially, I don't know, the hard copy, which I wasn't going to do, the hard copy when you're holding it, you're holding somebody who has moved into mastery and healing, a master healer. You're holding the beginnings of the unknown for yourself and that inner child. And that should be exciting, even though it can be scary as well. And it's a portal
Mm,
because one question could lead to a discovery in your body, which could lead to something else. And for me, there's two different messages that come through. I may be going off a little bit, but the first one is Mr. Rogers had me go to a lot of playgrounds, and I did some videos and dance and spend some time in nature and feel the earth. And I was at this one spot locally. I had heard about 15 years ago, there was this businesswoman, corporate woman. She would come to my yoga and meditation classes literally at 6 p.m. in her suit, and she didn't change because she didn't have time. So she literally, and I didn't care. I was like, come however way you want, but come, show up. That's part of it. And she introduced me to the concept of fairies and fairy portals in the state of PA. And it's interesting because you wouldn't think that this woman, if you talked to her and you saw the way she dressed, that she would be into fairies or portals. But I watched her house for a month. That she had a
mm,
portal in the backyard, and she talked about it. Now I never saw fairies, but I could feel the energy of it. So as I was in this play, going to the playgrounds, it was in the fall, so I think it was around September of this year. I witnessed seeing a fairy.
mm,
It was green and blue, and you would see it like if you saw it in the movies with the sprinkling like lights around it. And it was at the bottom of this forest hill. And if I could go down there, I would, but I was concerned about not being able to get back out. But there was sort of this portal in the bottom of a tree trunk. And I saw this magical little fairy and was really excited and blissful. Now, when I worked with children, who were 4 and 5 years ago. And I write about this in book one, Born to Teach. That's one of the chapters, Born to Teach. I'm sitting and I'm teaching them these meditations, one of them that's in here. And these children come in and they're telling me about their imaginary friends in their house, in their rooms. Now, think about it if you're a parent right now, or if you're not a parent, just think about this. How would you react if your child at dinner time or came in and said, "Oh, I was talking to so and so," how would you react? This is how we're going to have to redefine as we move into a new earth, because these children are coming from where? They're coming from the magical land of the angel, the ethers
mm-hmm.
into earth. And so it's our job not to poison them with chemicals and tons of shots and pills to dumb down their pineal and pituitary. It's our job to allow them to be magical beings. And so that's what I allowed with those 4 and 5 year olds. I didn't say, "Oh, you must have watched a good movie. And so now you're imagining it." I would, and so this is my suggestion to you. So when I came home, and this is what I would suggest to you, when we block that realm, because we see on the news, aliens, aliens, when we block the realm of possibilities, what are we doing to our higher telepathic selves? How are we being trained? Well, if it can be in a movie, why can't it be in real life?
Mm-hmm.
And so for parents out there, when the next time your 3 and 4 year old comes in and says, "Oh my gosh, I was just talking to an angel," my first thing would be like, "Wow, do you want to paint the angel? Let's paint a picture of the angel. What did the angel say? What is it trying to teach you? What do you think the
Right.
angel came to visit you?" Like all these questions that then opens the door. But I can guarantee you, especially in my city, especially with me, that would have been laughed at, ridiculed, closed quickly. but yet people are obsessed with movies. What are you programming? What are you downloading? Recently, just the last couple of days, I started watching Harry Potter movies. I never
Oh,
followed Harry Potter. I never read the books because before COVID, I really didn't watch TV or movies at all. My students in tap dancing actually were big Harry Potter fans years ago. I remember this now. So I started watching it and I related to Harry Potter right away. I was like, oh my gosh, I really relate to Harry Potter. And I was like, this is wild.
yeah, because
And the
he's a
magical
wizard. He's a wizard.
and the magical stuff that would happen sometimes, even in the dance studio with some of those kids that are now doctors and pilots. We had a spirit in the room, I remember, and talking about that. And they weren't like, you're crazy. They were like, we would interact, So it's like, I think because Hollywood took such a hold of society for so long, it dumbed us down in so many ways, me included within my family system, to be like, that is make believe or imagination, and this is real. And now I'm starting to wonder if we have to turn those tables, as well as many other things, obviously. But if keeping room for that imagination and creativity, you know what I mean? So that we can advance ourselves instead of being so curious about robots, which is fine, but why are we so curious about that and not curious about the kid that's like, oh my God, I just talked to an angel in my bedroom? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
why are we shutting that down so quickly? What program is that about? So these children were doing really hard meditations with me, and I would see them run out the door. And sometimes the parents would say, oh, they love that meditation. They want me to do it, but I don't have time. The parents just would sort of brush off these meditations. And my thing is not, when you learn some of these meditations, do them with your children. Start to bond with your children in a different way, in a healthier way, in a more, you know, transparent way, so there isn't this like, I'm just projecting what I went through as a child in some sort of way onto my children. You know what I mean? Like, as we see these programs and these patterns repeating. Um, so that's one thing that the fairy portals, when I think about, when I think about this child, you could see a really, really bright-eyed light bulb, and then you could see somebody that basically can't open her eyes, that looks like she had a stroke. And you kind of go, oh, why didn't anybody see this? Well, that's a question for them to ask, right? The people who are in my life. And what are we not seeing in the workplace? What are we not seeing in America right now? What are we not seeing that we need to see? And that's partly the stripping of trauma. And when you talk about my dad and my ancestors, I'm sharing something really deep, but this is what happens when you buy this book and you start to write your own story out in a deeper way. Because it's not about getting your book published. It's really about writing your own life, knowing your life records, and it takes
Mm.
time. And so two of the thoughts is I had a visit from my grandmother, my maternal grandmother's older sister who raised her, and my great aunt who passed away. And I wasn't able to attend her funeral because I wanted to protect my boundaries. These two women, along with my Uncle Jack, I had a few hours where I was crying and shaking, and we had some conversation, and they were asking for forgiveness from the other side. And they were speaking some truth about the family lineage. And that was pretty deep. These things can happen for you. You don't need somebody like me to tell you what they're saying. I mean, that can happen sometimes, but I love to ask the questions to get you to have it and me to validate it. I love validating more than I love, being the psychic. But it happens in a process of continuing to unravel within. And the last note I want to mention before I go, take it away, is this, is today and yesterday, as I'm unraveling one of my personal past lives, which in all honesty, I don't like having to heal so much, but at least it's my past life this time and not like another ancestors or like somebody else. It's like, okay, I can get to me now. And it was really clear that I get information from trees and soil and water and plants and animals. Like I am a shaman. Like I never knew that, but it is definite. And book 2 describes that. My dad wanted people to know the beginnings. I didn't have it in the beginning. I have it now, right? So you think, oh, I want to be able to get a download and go to Tennessee and learn like, but you might not, you might have to go through some steps before you can get all that, right? And so that's why my dad wanted book 1 for a lot of reasons, to get my foundation right, but to
Yeah.
also get your foundation right before you start going into these systems. And we get our leaders to rewire some and restructure the way we're building some things. But I got the download because one of my past lives is really, really intense and deep. And that I'm supposed to go to Georgia. So I was going to project out there, like if somebody wants to hire me to speak or teach, I need to go to Stone Mountain and I need to spend some time there on the land because I will get some really concrete information about a past life there. Land gives me the information. So that became very clear, within the last, I'd say, day, but
Oh,
specifically today. So there you go. I mean, that's what happens when you're in the process of this lifestyle of coming into, in this time period, our authentic selves, so that we don't keep repeating these cycles and we can start to help others not repeat in the system, so that we're leaving a legacy of what? Of not the same stuff, but a legacy that has more unconditional love in the soil and the water and the trees and in the breath and then in the voice and in the God and the goddess of man and woman walking this earth, Mother Earth.
yeah, that goes back to the goddess, like the Mother Earth. And you're talking about Stone Mountain. I don't live too far from Stone Mountain, actually. We went back in June, and let me tell you, things that trip to the mountain with the group catapulted, it shifted a lot. It changed. So I understand why you're being called to do this ancestral work, because that's what you do. You're a grid worker, you're all these things. But yeah, Stone Mountain definitely has, yeah, there's a lot. That day was interesting, to say the least. Like, I'll tell you a little bit of it. So me and my boyfriend went because we had heard about the trip that Brother Rich had done in previous years. And I lived in Tennessee at the time, and I was like,
Mm.
oh, I can't make it, can't make it. So this year we put our sights on going. That same weekend, he happened to be away on a trip. So I put my prayers out, and I was like, he's going to be back just in time for us to go. And he was. Within hours, he got a little bit of sleep. We woke up at like 3:34 a.m. to go make the trip. Everything was divinely aligned. We make it up there. There were bees, there was frogs. The frog is my spirit animal. So there was a frog just hopping in and chirping and dancing in front of me. That whole experience was something else. And I know it still would have been the same if I would have went solo. Yes, I went with a group, but it's just something about the place to me. Because have you ever been? Have you been to Stone Mountain?
No, but I was going to go. I was actually going to go on one of Brother Rich's some other event,
Yeah.
but Jimmy Slide stopped me. So, and that's in book 2, which they'll do. So what the messages that I'm getting is that I will either go for a job, I'll go for an assignment where I'm teaching or speaking, or I get a strong sense that my dad, my grandmother, they're all setting something up for me maybe to meet my divine counterpartner and then go to Georgia, but I don't know. So I stay detached, but I'm not supposed to just go and I'm not
Right.
supposed to just go alone. So I actually paid for an event. I didn't pay for the flight. Actually, the flight, I kept trying to book it and it wouldn't book. And I knew after 2 days something was up. And then that's when Jimmy Slide became very strong with his Kentucky Fried Chicken smell. And I was like, and then he started talking to me and he's like, sweetie, you can't go yet. It's not
You're
time.
not supposed to go.
I was like, okay, I'm not going, I guess. Cancel. So they'll lead it. And that's also a new way for me to work uh, because I'm so used to submitting and trying to get jobs and this and that. And they're like, no, we kind of have to set this up and you're gonna just kind of have to trust us. It's like,
Well, yeah, to me, that's the best way for things to work because it's even how me and you connected. Like, I just happened to see a comment under a video and was like, I need to contact her for some reason. I didn't even know all the things you did. I just was drawn. And to me, that's how energy works. That's how you're being guided by your dad, your grandmother, Jimmy Slide, Mr. Rogers, all of these other people. They're not going to steer you wrong.
right.
They are not going to steer you wrong. They're going to say, Heather, either they're going to say, do this, or that's not a good idea. It's not a good time, or whatever they tell you. Let me see. I think, oh, I do have another question. I think this might be my last question. So I noticed back in 2018 you had this name like Sangeeta, which like
Sangita.
it's Sangeeta,
Mhm.
which I know means music. So it's dealing with anything musical. What was the transition behind like no longer calling yourself that and where you are right now with this book release?
That's a great question.
Because I saw it and was like,
Yeah,
what's
and
up
I had
with
to get
this?
that switched on my Amazon author page to have Heather Ann Ferry because Heather Ann Ferry, I just switched my YouTube channel to Heather Ann Ferry. So when I published book one, Victim to Victory, I mean, obviously I was going through a lot of trauma and a lot of stuff was happening. And I was confused about my name because I was confused about my identity, I think fitting in with my family system, I think. And Sangeeta was a name I was given when I became a Kundalini Yoga certified teacher, which really resonated. The meaning, princess, sing music to the gods, goddesses, and inspire others to use their voice, which is ironic because, I go through all these chokings and my ancestors go through all these chokings. And so I think it is a chapter. This next chapter is about using my voice. As much as I'm freeing up my body and dancing again, it was really about using my voice for them as well, the women of my maternal bloodline. But so I was in a lot of confusion. Like I was really confused. Do I put Sangeeta on the cover? Do I put, just Heather Ferry on the cover? And so I put Sangeeta, and I think that was the right setup,
Hmm.
for it all. The decision to, I slowly started to release that name. Um, and uh, that's when I went into a 7-year karmic cycle, which is in book two, where Divine Mother gives me some important work assignments dealing with the systems. And it was when my dad passed away too that I started using Heather Ann just to get the 1111, that Anne being more the feminine energy. Heather
Mm-hmm.
had such a masculine energy. And I noticed when people called me Heather Ann, there was a lightness to me that needed to happen. Um, because Heather Ann Ferry is 11, 11, 11. And really, the reason I went back to that name and will continue is it's the birth name that I was given. And I think that the stories that I have in my book series is important for American history. And it's important for, I chose to be born in this lifetime in the United States for a reason. And even though I have a lot of mystical abilities, and maybe America needs to rewire what that is, a more definition of spirituality or consciousness in them. And but I will say that Sangeeta resides deeply into my heart in a past life, and I'm actually learning more about what that past life is at this moment. So it's unraveling, and she is the one that carries so much wisdom of these ancient sciences, and in essence, with the Divine Mother, Mother Mary, and all these great ascended masters assisting me to unravel the complexities of a lot of really hardcore abuse, like really physical. Like we can go mental, emotional, spiritual, but we're talking like physical torture.
Hmm.
So
Well, yeah, I just wanted to know about the name. I saw it and was like, ooh, I gotta ask her. Well, are there any final things you wish for us to know about this book?
no, I just want to thank you for revisiting, having me back on. I want to just say to everybody who takes the time to listen to this, many blessings to you, many blessings to this channel, that it grows and that people, get what they seek. And if you feel resonant to buy my book on Amazon, that would be wonderful. You'll just know. And or you might know somebody that, a couple days from now, you're like, you know what? I know a colleague or a friend that may benefit, or I know a wellness center that may benefit, or I know an organization that may benefit, that type of thing, because it really is a dance. One thing you'll learn in book two is I've always been a collaborator of wanting to work with systems,
Hmm.
but then there's all these blocks, and that's what we talk about in book two. You know, the powers of be, the limitations, the stagnation, it's and I think it's the lack of understanding goddess.
Yeah, well, we came full circle. We came full circle. That's how it always works. It always comes full circle. Well, everybody, you can purchase Heather Ann's book on Amazon. And is it available on your website too? Like, can people find
No,
the link? Okay.
no,
But
it's just on
find it on
Amazon.
Amazon. The full title, let me read it again: Transcending Victim to Goddess, Disrupting the Family Matrix and Healing Generational Trauma from My Bloodline. Look that up. Get it, buy it for your organization. Purchase it for someone you know. Let's say you're a therapist. Let's say you own a wellness center. You're a CEO. We talked about CEOs here. Bring it to your mastermind.
Mm,
Do this book in your mastermind.
mm,
Whatever realms you find, this book is a tool. It's a healing tool. It's a manual. All of these questions that are it, soul questions, they're going to have you really expand yourself, your organization, your family, and everyone around you. And you heard it right here on our after show. We will see you next time on one of our Wednesday shows. Bye, everybody. Okay.